So, welcome to the beginning of a new series. This one we're going to look at how to make a top-down shooter. So, that can be used for like say a dungeon crawl, although some of those tend to take like kind of a three-quarters perspective, but effectively it's the same mechanics. It's just whether you're drawing an object from a top view or kind of like down at an angle. So we're going to look at far as multi-directional scrolling, shooting, tracking of ammo, picking up ammo, boss battles, that kind of thing. So let's get started. So start by holding the Alt key in your keyboard and then clicking on the Unity icon, and you'll get this menu. Click on Create New Project. I'm going to choose 2D and choose Create. For those of you who are brand new to Unity, I'll give you a quick tour. The center part here, where it reads Scene, this is where is your workspace. This is where you can drag and drop items. You can manipulate items visually in here. To the left is the hierarchy. This is the name of everything that's in the workspace. So you can either highlight something by clicking in the workspace, or you can click on its name in the hierarchy. The assets down here, this is everything that is part of the project. And then the right side is the inspector. The inspector shows you the attributes of anything that's been clicked on. So if you click on main camera in the hierarchy, you can see the borders of the camera. I'm just going to use the scroll wheel to scroll out a little bit. And then you can see over here the attributes of that object. So let's begin. And you just drag and drop. So first thing, we need the background. So since it's a top-down perspective, it'll be the floor, it'll be the ground, whatever surface the character happens to be traveling over. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag and drop that image into the hierarchy. I was going to make some changes to it, but let's just drag it back, and you've now created what's known as a prefab. The difference is this that you started with is just an image. This, once you dragged it into the hierarchy, it has a transform component, has a sprite renderer component, so this is now an actual game object. So this is a resource, this is an actual object. Okay? So let's also right click, choose create, and choose folder, and call that prefab. Usually I wait until later into the series to create folders, but very quickly, since we're getting right into prefabs, I want to be able to differentiate between the image and the actual object. So we'll just go ahead and drag and drop that into the prefab folder. Now we delete the original. Okay. So far nothing really to look at. This is really just prep, importing images, creating our first few objects. Now go to game object, choose create empty. You see a game object is created. Rename this GM. The actual name doesn't matter, but it's meant to be the game master object. This is going to drive the most part of what's happening. This is really going to control what's happening on the screen. Now, for those of you who are new to Unity, Unity breaks up the applications, games, whatever you're making, into logical sections known as scenes. A scene would be, say, a level in an old school side-scrolling beat-em-up, or a side-scrolling shooter, a platformer, those kinds of things. That would be a level. If you have a game that has a really complex menu, such as like skill trees and things like that, that actually might be its own scene. the space between doors in like an old school survival horror where it loads when you enter a door, that would be a scene. So it's really a collection of assets and functionality. And like I said, typically you can think of it as like a level in the game. So what we're going to do now is we're going to click on Add Component. We're going to click on New Script. And we'll call this Game Master. It's going to be C#. So you click on Create and Add. This is going to be used for a lot of different functions. For one, it's going to make the actual environment that your character will be traveling along. So there's a couple ways you can make an environment. You can manually drag and drop an object repeatedly in, and then you slide it around, and you make your environment. Now that takes a lot of time to do all the dragging and dropping, to do the lining up. Not to mention it makes it a disaster to try to troubleshoot, because you could easily have dozens and dozens of these, so every single object would take up space here. So the better way to do it is to use the script to create the environment. So first what we have to do is we have to create a variable. In fact, the bulk of what you do is driven by variables. Almost any action that takes place in a game is because a variable changed. Health points changed, ammo was depleted, an item was picked up. All that is tracked with variables. So even though you may think of the visual graphics on the screen, what's actually tracking are variables. So create a variable, you use public, and there's two types. There are, let's call them local variables, which are only available to the object that the script is attached to. And then there's what's known as static variables, and those are variables to any object anywhere in any scene. And those would be things like health points for your player. If you have like some kind of quest log, that needs to be tracked. So anything that really you don't want to just have be randomly reset, something that needs to be, as the name would suggest, it's static. It's not gonna keep changing unless you explicitly say, you took a potion and so it healed your health points. You fired a bullet so it depleted your ammo. So this will just be a local variable. So you type the word public, then you type the type it is, and this will just be a transform type. And then we'll call it floor tile. Many lines in Unity, or should I say in C#, have to be terminated with a semicolon. Certain ones don't, like when you've got a routine like this. Obviously there's no semicolon here, there's no semicolon there, but most lines will end with a semicolon. It may look strange to see if you're not used to C#. Think of it of like terminating a sentence with a period. It's the closest comparison I can think of. And now what you want to do is, once you've saved this, which we did, you're going to notice here in the GM object, it shows up here, floor tile. So what you do is you take your prefab, so you have your GM object highlighted, drag and drop, and now what you've done is you've made the GM object aware of this object, and so now the GM can manipulate this object. It can instantiate it, it can destroy it, it can rotate it. So let's go back to the script, and we want this to happen in start. We want this to occur as soon as the level loads. So this is a for loop, and we're just taking, and in this case the variable is only being used to set up the instantiation, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in just a second. So what this is going to be is we're going to have this cycle through a series of locations. Okay. So what this is saying is it's an integer. This is the variable. I'm just calling it wrap short for repeat because we're just repeating. We're going through, or we're repeating the instantiation of an object. We'll get to the actual instantiation in a minute. So rep is the variable, starts at -10, and actually if it's less than +10, then rep plus plus. Basically, this is again the variable name. This is simply how you increment the variable by 1. Now, for the next line, it is instantiate. So as we said, we created prefab. One of the primary reasons why you create a prefab is so you can instantiate it. You use the variable name. So this variable is actually the you're referring to the object itself. Now we have to say where it's being put. To do that, we have to say its locations. It's x, y, and z coordinates. That way the variable is going to be the x coordinate. Y can just be, we'll set it at 0 just so it's dead center. And then we can leave z as 0. And then we do so the final part of the instantiation command is the rotation of the object. In this case, we want to use the object on rotation. We don't want to rotate it based on, say, if you're in a 3D environment, you may want the object to rotate based on the environment that you're in rather than having it using its own default rotation. So, instantiate this object at this location, and what should happen is you're going to see a horizontal line across the center of the screen, and it's going to have the floor tile. Error message down here at 15:9. So the reason why is I forgot my semicolon. You'll see me do that an awful lot. Now if you notice, the for line does not need a semicolon. This does. That should go away. And it did, and now we're going to run it. Just click the play button at the top, and it did exactly what we said it would. You now have basically a procedurally generated background. Now, usually when you hear that term, they usually implies a random element to it. In this case, there's not, but you would just build on this if you truly wanted random, like say you wanted a hole in a floorboard here, or a chair, whatever. You would add more objects, make more prefabs, and then you'd have randomized statements choosing which ones. So the first thing is there's not enough space. I could tell they're overlapping. So let's replace this. This is another way that you can increment a variable, is by doing plus equals. So you're saying whatever it's equal to, add this amount to it. So kind of strange to look at, but basically that's what you're saying. You're saying take its current value and add that amount to it. Save it again and see how that looks. So that looks better. Still a little bit of overlap, but you get the idea. And so that's the beginnings of creating the environment.